So jumping right back in here into ending rape culture, and we're gonna dig into that, right? Rape culture and consent, right? So understanding consent to start off. So what messages do we hear about consent, right? And we talked about these different situations and scenarios and about CSI and learning things from, Law and Order SVU and different things. But where do we get that message, that clear message about what consent is?
From parents, from the way she dresses, from people like that.
Yeah, so parents, family members, right? Where else do we hear messages about consent? About what it is, what it means, what kind of conversation goes into that? Do you think that we hear it in music? No? Yeah? Is it a good message about consent? Like, is it a positive, healthy message about consent? Okay, what about, on different forms of media? What about video games, right? Do we hear messages about consent in video games? Can you give me an example? Okay, so getting permission, right, to be able to play a certain game. Okay, so that's a type of permission that they have to get. But what about in relationships, right, with your friends, your family, and your social circles? Where do we get those messages about what that healthy relationship, what that healthy conversation looks like? So talking from the legal side, right, legal consent. A person cannot legally consent to sex if they are under the age of 17, under the use or threat of physical violence, unconscious, unaware, or unable to resist, or mentally incapacitated, under the influence of drugs, or if they have been coerced or exploited by a public servant, mental health professional, clergyman, or employee of a facility where the victim resides. Right? And another thing that was brought to my attention was being under the influence of drugs. Right? So what is, I want to ask y'all, what is most commonly referred to as the most common drug to facilitate rape? Rohypnol, and I heard alcohol as well. Right? And that's the thing, right? That alcohol is actually the #1 drug used to facilitate rape. But in legal terms, it's not included, right, in the code here. So people commonly refer to just Rohypnol, right, as being slipped into a drink, and that's where that myth comes from, right, of covering your drink, of, yeah.
Because often has a developmental disability, say Down syndrome or something like that, and they're adults, are they under the whole blanket of being what they call mentally incapacitated to be able to consent no matter what the situation is?
Right. Yes. Were there any other questions about the legal definition here? So we're going to get into this conversation about consent, right? We talked about where these messages come from, what it means, how it's defined, and how we have that conversation. So this graphic that I have up here, right? Consent is voluntary, sober, enthusiastic, verbal, non-coerced. It is continual, active, and honest, right? If you are lacking, if any of these things are missing, right, that's rape, right? An important thing to focus on here is that it's continual conversation, right? It's constantly checking in with that partner, right? It's non-coerced, there was no manipulation. It's clear, it's enthusiastic, and it's continual, right? It's checking in throughout the entire process. It's present before, during, and after, right? Just because someone has consented, right, to something the last time, right, that they did something, doesn't mean it's still there this time, right? It's continual checkup. It's saying, hey, last time, we did this. Are you still comfortable with what we did, right? Is that something that we can continue today, right? They can, at any moment, retract that and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable doing that anymore, right? And it's being able to respect that and have that check-in, right? And afterward, too, saying, hey, was that okay? What we did, how are you feeling? Are you okay with what we did, right? It's continual, right? It's not forced. It's not sneaky, right? It's not having to create some type of loophole to get that answer. It's not just because they didn't say no, right? They have to say yes. It's verbal, right? It's enthusiastic. Both parties, all parties involved have to be fully aware of what's happening and be fully comfortable with what's happening, right? Consent is about discussing boundaries, right? So that check-in. It's not just one person's responsibility, right, to understand what's happening and to call all the shots, right? It's constant, and it's both parties involved. It's saying, hey, checking in, are you okay with what we're doing? Are you okay with what's happening? Are you uncomfortable? Are you okay with this? Are you okay with that? Right? It's not just one person's responsibility. All parties involved have to be aware and comfortable with what's happening. It promotes comfort and safety, right? It's regardless of the type of relationship, right? So if this is something casual and only happening, once in a while or once, or if it's something that you are in a committed relationship and this is something that you do often, right? Regardless of the type of relationship that it is, it has to always be present, and it has to be verbal and continual. Boundaries may shift based on time and situations, right? So it can change. And you have the right to change your mind. You have the right to express that and say, I don't want to do that anymore, right? And so it's everyone's responsibility to not just state your boundaries and be comfortable saying that, but the other person also respecting that boundary, right? And being comfortable with having that conversation of, you know what, you did that last time and now you don't, that's okay, right? I want us to both be comfortable with what we're doing. It requires the two-way conversation and involves taking no for an answer. Have y'all ever seen that video with the consent is like tea, like having a cup of tea? No? Well, the type of example that I like to use, it was tea in the video, but it's when you invite someone over, right? And I'm a big fan of pizza rolls. Okay, I love pizza rolls. So let's use pizza rolls as our example. Let's say I invite one of y'all over to my house, and you know what, hey, I have made some pizza rolls. Would you like some? And you're like, yeah, I would love some. I love pizza rolls, right? And this time you have pizza rolls. Okay, cool. So now we're both comfortable with us eating pizza rolls. That's great. It's a pizza roll party. But then the next time I invite you over, I'm like, hey, I made pizza rolls again. Eat them. And you're like, well, no, you know what? I already ate. I'm a little full. I don't want to eat pizza roll. Do I have the right to get upset, right? And say, hey, no, last time you had pizza rolls. So this time you have to have at least one, if not 5, right? And because you had them last time, so eat all these pizza rolls, right? And what if the next time they come over, I'm like, okay, the first time you had pizza rolls, the second time you don't want pizza rolls, now you have to have pizza rolls. I am so frustrated with you changing your mind and not eating my pizza rolls, and I'm just trying to do something nice for you. Do I have to give you those pizza rolls? Do you have to eat those pizza rolls? Am I allowed to just start bringing them near your mouth and start trying to make you eat the pizza roll, even though you've already said, you know what, I'm not really feeling like pizza rolls today, right? And I should be able to respect that. I say, you know what, that's perfectly fine, right? And when you leave and the next time I invite you over, I say, hey, you know what, just a heads up, I might have some pizza rolls, but if you don't want any, that's perfectly fine. Right? You don't have to eat them. That's perfectly fine, whatever you're comfortable with. Right? So pizza rolls, it might be a silly, right, analogy that we're using, right? It's pizza rolls, but keep that in mind, right? When you have that conversation about consent with these audiences that you're working with, right, in these workshops, your clients, be clear about what consent is, right? It's continual. It has to be present before, during, and after. It's a constant check-in, right? It's saying, hey, are you comfortable with what we're doing? And it's fine if you're not. Right? And also being able to express that boundary of your own, right? Saying, hey, you know what? I know I said that I was cool with that, but I kind of want to stop, right? And I hope that you can respect that. I hope that we can maybe do something else, right? Or maybe take some time to get there, right? So you have that right, to establish that boundary and also to respect it, right? So that's consent. It's discussing. It's a constant, continual discussion of just checking in and being able to respect those boundaries and talk about those boundaries. And I know we already touched up a bit on rape culture, so just overviewing here, some media portrayal, right? And it's so prevalent because we see these ads, these commercials, these portrayals in all sorts and types of media constantly, right? So I want you to take a look at this picture here. And when you look at advertisements, be cognizant that there are 2 messages, right, that are being displayed. There's the product that they're selling. Would you be able to tell me what product they are selling in this picture? Yeah? A perfume. And that has happened, right? Where maybe the product is not even in the picture, right? So for Duncan Quinn, right? This is for a suit, right? That tux, that man's suit. Would you have been able to get that, from this advertisement in a magazine or on a commercial or in a movie or something? There's a completely different message that's being sold as well, right? Of that dominance, of that power, saying, you know what, if you buy this suit, right, look at all the power and dominance you have. Look at how strong and how attractive you're gonna be, right? This is the ideal image that you wanna be, right? But at the same time, what messages are we giving about women? What messages are we giving about that portrayal, right, of respect? Right? So it's a little, okay, right? Is that a company, right, that's selling suits, right? They're perpetuating, right, those messages, right? They are completely in control of what message is being given out. And they have this woman being tied by the tie, right, on top of the car. Right? So, and then there's this stuff that we flip through, right? We see it and we're like, okay, we see them on commercials, on different programs, different medias, and it's something that we're just kind of desensitized, right? We're kind of used to it. It's something common, right? But it's taking that moment to really look at it and say, what message is being given here, right? And then it's our duty to be able to have that conversation, right? To be able to rewrite that narrative and continue that discussion about why this is problematic, why this is unhealthy. Dr. Pepper, all 23 flavors, just 10 manly calories. It's not for women. So that was an actual advertisement, right? That was shown on TV. And it would be just advertising this Dr. Pepper that only had 10 calories. And not just 10 calories, 10 manly calories. And it's not for women. So what message? What do y'all think about that message? Okay. Yeah, it's saying, based strictly on your gender, that's what's defining, right? You as a person. This is not for you, right? You're not strong enough, right? That ideal person to drink that. Right? So again, the two different messages, right? They're trying to sell this new Dr. Pepper, that's the product, and then that unhealthy message, right? Of who you are as a person, just strictly discriminatory toward your gender. And it's extremely problematic, right? Because everyone who's watching this, whether it's on the TV or on magazines or anything, is picking up on that, right? Because it's a norm, right? Maybe it's funny. Maybe it's something that they see often. So becoming desensitized to it, right? And just agreeing like, oh, whatever. It's funny, it's just an ad, right? But no, right? There's more to it. Rape language, right? So when there is a news story, right, that's covering a sexual assault, just take a look at the language, right? So CNN will post a headline saying that the boys were promising students, right? That they just continued to make excuses for the rapist. They had promising football careers, right? It's that language. It's placing, supporting, right, and encouraging the perpetrator and saying, oh man, what a shame that this was reported, right? Because they had such great reputations, right? Or USA Today, right, stressing that the victim was drunk, right? So it's perpetuating, right, that language of blaming the victim, of asking those harmful questions of, well, that's what they get for what they were wearing, or because they drank too much, or because they were doing a certain thing or saying certain things, right? So it's in our everyday language, right? It's all over the media, it's all over the news. So what's the role that we can take, right, in rewriting that narrative and being able to have those conversations and acknowledging that this is problematic, right? That the perpetrators need to be held accountable, right? And that survivors of sexual abuse, need and deserve our support, right? And believing them and saying, look, we understand that as a society, right, as a community, this is what's being said on the media, but here, we're creating safe spaces. And so if someone
pardon? I was going to say like at Baylor. Mm-hmm. Who knows how many years this was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm.
Yeah,
but-
absolutely. Yes,
that
the case at
coach got
Baylor.
fired, a lot of people got fired
Mhm.
because of they were letting the football players, it was, just get away with everything, and then they
Right.
were backing them up.
And that's playing into the culture, right, of the campus.
Exactly.
What, how would they feel, right? Like victims and survivors of this is what is being published and this is what's being believed, right? These headlines, these stressing that they were drunk, the victim blaming, and giving the support to the perpetrator, right? That's not creating that safe environment for them to be able to feel safe and comfortable enough to report, right? They'll be fearful that they won't be believed or that everyone believes this because they're giving all their support, right? The campus was trying to continue supporting the football players, right? And saying, no, they had promising careers, they're such great students, right? But where's that support, right, for the victim? If they want to come forward, if this is something that's very prevalent on campuses, right? It's very difficult for survivors to come forward when this is what's being published, right? That it was their fault and that, you know, what a shame, you know, for the perpetrator because they're football players or they had such great grades, you know, they're great students or.
I work with a very heavily dominated male population of the military. So it aggravates me and frustrates me quite a bit when I have active duty soldiers. There's some female, but mostly male, that their commands say whether they're such a good soldier or airman or whatever the rank is, and they're supporting whatever it is that they did, whatever the things that they did. It's really frustrating. I need to also, your media portrayal, I also co-facilitate a men's group, all active duty members. And it's really frustrating when I go to, there's a certain section of the group that we talk about the whole media portrayal and gender relationships and stereotypes. It's really frustrating because I'm the only female in the group facilitating. It's kind of frustrating because it's so ingrained.
Yeah, those norms have already been established, right, for so many years, right? It's just ingrained already. It's everyday language, it's an everyday belief. It's so common, right, for that. It's in that system, right, like you're talking about. It's just that common norm, that common belief.
I do think we're going through an awakening.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I really do think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, the program at UTSA, this thing, that box man, whatever his name is, that just got fired, the women having the courage to come forward. You know, so there is, I
Absolutely.
think, a definite awakening.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it has to do with taking that initiative,
Yes.
right? And you, like you said, you had noticed that. And just to y'all sitting in this room right now, right? And how we went through this activity, like there's a reason that you're in this room right now, right? There's a reason that we are talking about these things. There's a reason that you're paying attention to this, right? And hopefully taking something from it. But I want to encourage you to continue that awakening, right? That enlightening, that being that person, right? That facilitates that conversation, taking that initiative to be a pro-social bystander, right? To have these conversations. Because for a long time, we couldn't talk about it, right? And it's still kind of prevalent now, right? It's kind of one of those topics that suddenly everyone starts to get uncomfortable, right? They kind of start, okay, well, I don't know where we're going to take this conversation, but it's okay, right? It's create that safe space to be able to have that conversation, make that person feel comfortable with talking about that, right? Let them know, like, hey, let's talk about these different things that go into it, right? So I'm so happy that you bring that up because I would hope so, right? That is what's happening. So I want to encourage y'all to continue that conversation, not just in these spaces, but in any space that you're at, right? Is continuing these conversations and being cognizant of everything that's prevalent and happening around us. Another thing is gender socialization, right? So again, we're talking about those norms that are already ingrained, right? It has already been established. It's just a social norm. It's accepted, right? But we have to challenge that,